As the business owner, it's my duty to do everything I can to grow my business and improve it every bit that I can. And sometimes I have to make decisions that aren't necessarily popular.
Welcome to a special edition episode of the Game Changing Attorney Podcast featuring the Elite Firm of the Year award winner announced at the 2024 CRISP Game Changers Summit, Sofia Miguel, the founder of the law office of Sofia K. Miguel.
But at the end of the day, it's what's best for not only me and the business, but also for my team.
I'm Michael Mogill, founder and CEO of CRISP, the nation's #1 law firm growth company. I've built my business through practice, not theory. CRISP started with just $500 to my name and has grown to over 8 figures in revenue over the last few years, earning a spot on the Inc. 500 list of the fastest growing private companies in America. Our approach has been to take everything we've learned about generating massive growth within our own organization and help the country's most ambitious and committed law firm owners do the same for theirs. In each episode of this podcast, I sit down with innovative market leaders from the legal industry and beyond to learn from those who thrive in the face of adversity, challenge the status quo, and define what it means to be a true game changer. I sat down with Sofia to discuss why resilience and perseverance are crucial for overcoming personal and professional challenges, the significance of creating a consciously collaborative firm culture, and how to implement standard operating procedures, SOPs, in your law firm to ensure a consistent client experience.
That is something I absolutely struggle with, knowing that if I'm going to enforce a standard, that there's a possibility that I'm going to be nobody's favorite. But at the same time, growth and leadership means you do have to make those tough decisions.
That's coming up on the Game Changing Attorney Podcast. Before we begin today's episode, I want to remind you that we aren't beholden to any sponsors or run any ads on this podcast. This allows us to present all of our episodes raw and unfiltered. I'm not going to push any made-to-order meal services on you or try to save you any money on your car insurance. That being said, I have one small request. If you receive any value from this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. Pay the fee so we can keep this podcast free. All right, Sofia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here, Michael.
Well, I am honored to have you here because you were our 2024 Elite Firm of the Year winner. So we're going to get to a lot of that in terms of the wins that you've experienced, how the firm has grown and transformed. But for people that are listening that may not be familiar with the firm, what's kind of like your origin story? Not even the law firm yet, but essentially what led you to the practice of law?
I was led to the practice of law ultimately because I wanted to have a career in my life that was fulfilling and that I knew that I could rely on myself and I wouldn't have to worry about relying on anybody else.
So that sounds like an 8-print kind of thing of strong and self-reliant. Why? Like, why was that so important to you?
As a child, I saw my parents divorced, I saw, the struggles that they had and those kinds of things. And I just wanted to know, that I would be okay, could rely on myself.
And then I guess one of the things I'm curious about is before going to law school, you spent several years in the Army Reserves. What led you to do that?
I think everything in my life kind of leads back to, the same thing, right? I'm just looking for a pathway to do something, to make myself better, to improve. I was never going to be happy not doing that. I mean, I think that self-improvement is, for many people, just sort of a basic human need, right? So that's how I came to it. I wanted to better my life.
Gotcha. And then I'm curious now, like firm origin story. So, most lawyers, they graduate from law school, they start working at a big law firm, they spend their careers there. What compelled you to break out and start your own firm?
Sure. I'm going to actually disagree with you on that. I don't think most lawyers go to a big law firm. Law schools
or
want
go
you
to
to
a law firm.
Yeah, to a law firm, right. Big law is not as common or even as desirable as, you might be led to believe, right? For me, I did start out working at a law firm, personal injury. I wanted to do personal injury even when I was in law school. It's hard to say why I was drawn to that other than just I've always been, right, like I want to help the underdog. But also, even while I was still in law school, I knew that eventually I wanted to have my own firm. And that just comes down to a need for autonomy, a need to drive myself, a need to be free to make the choices and decisions that I make, live or die by them. But, I was never destined to be under somebody's thumb for my entire career.
What was the vision early on for the firm?
The vision early on was that I would have a partner and we would build a firm and it would be a personal injury law firm. And, that was really it.
So that was expectation. So what was reality? Like when you first started, what did that first year look like?
It didn't look like much, to be brutally honest. It's hard. I'm obviously I've gone it alone, and the first year was just really about figuring out a lot of things, because obviously in law school, they don't teach you how to run a business. Learning those pieces of it, I'd say was really the challenge.
Do you recall anything like specific in terms of like a particular challenge early on that you had to overcome to make that next leap?
I mean, so many. Michael, honestly, I think the challenges are more now because early on, right, you're getting cases, you're working cases, you're moving forward. You don't have that much to worry about. Pay your rent, make sure your malpractice insurance is paid, those kinds of things. But as the firm grows and suddenly now, I'm thinking about marketing and team building and culture, all of those things, the challenges they're bigger now.
One, a competitive market in Washington, very much male dominated, competing against a lot of other personal injury firms. What were some of the things that you did to stand out and differentiate?
Right. Well, and obviously, Michael, that is one of them, right? I'm one of the only female personal injury law firm owners, in my area. I'm not actually sure what the numbers are across the state, but so that alone does, give you, I think, a place to position yourself. There's always going to be people that want to go to the male-dominated firms, always, but at the same time, I have found that there are people that particularly want me, want a woman-owned firm, and they do come to us.
What about some of the things in terms of just getting cases? I mean, you mentioned early on it really wasn't a challenge, but just getting the phone to ring was like, how did you go about getting cases? Was it referrals and word of mouth or something else?
Yeah, sure. Early on, it was mostly referrals and word of mouth, and that is still an important part of our practice. But obviously now we do more marketing in a variety of ways, community outreach, pay-per-click, all the things that everybody's doing.
So we fast forward, let's say 10 plus years, I believe over the past year, the firm has doubled both in revenue and caseload. Like what do you attribute that to?
Crisp.
Okay. This is the Game Changing Attorney podcast, but like what things specifically, or in terms of what types of changes did you make?
When you're in law school, right? When I was in law school, which we won't talk about how many years ago that was, but they would tell you, don't market. People who market, lawyers who market are wrong, bad, whatever. You shouldn't market if you're a lawyer. So you get out of law school with this really mistaken idea. And just coming around to the idea that it is good and right to market your law firm is absolutely huge.
What type of marketing did you start doing?
Sure. Well, so now I have billboards. I do pay-per-click. I do, obviously, I market to the chiropractors in the area, medical providers, I should say, and community outreach that, in any way I can. We're still very much in a growth phase, and all of those things are continuing to evolve.
What about the shift from, I find that so many firms remain solos for their entire careers. Like, what was that shift for you in terms of just starting you as the only lawyer to now having a team of lawyers?
So now we have a total of 3 lawyers, including me. And sometimes things happen. They just happen to happen at the right time. And I don't know how to explain that. But so my Colby is a 5286. So I'm a quick start.
A quick start, yep.
Yeah. So what that means is that a lot of times opportunity comes along and I jump on it. And maybe that means I'm going to pay the price later. Just as often, it turns out to be good. So with my first attorney hire, it was actually somebody else who came to me and said, hey, I think you should hire this attorney. And I said, okay. And, went with it and then immediately needed to grow to support that. And that's how that got started.
And then even in addition to the attorneys, how the staff has grown. I think I remember you at one point describing that there was a time where the culture was non-existent, and then that changed to one of high standards and collaboration. What led to that change?
Well, what led to that change was the understanding that if we truly want to grow and we want to stand out in our market and want to be able to provide the service that we can provide, those things are essential. You have to have your team aligned, working together. If not, you're not going to go anywhere.
And I want to dig in more on standards, because most firm owners, I imagine, they have an idea of what great looks like, but they're apprehensive about setting those standards and reinforcing those standards. What was your experience? I mean, why weren't these in place from the beginning?
Oh, to be totally honest, because I wasn't aware I needed to do that. That sounds awful, right? Like, I should have known that. We mentioned my Colby score a minute ago. Well, my print is a 4.3. So that's, first to be liked and second to be successful. So that is something I absolutely struggle with, knowing that if I'm going to enforce a standard, that there's a possibility, right, that I'm going to be nobody's favorite. But at the same time, growth and leadership means you do have to make those tough decisions. And I've been doing a lot of that these past few years, for sure.
Let's dig into that. I remember after you received your award on stage at the summit last year, you were almost in tears. You told me, like, do you have any idea what this past year has been? And I said, well, no. But if you could speak to some of that, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
This past year has been, it has provided extensive opportunity for growth.
It's a good way to put it.
But I've come out of it on the other side so much better for it. These past couple of years have been absolutely amazing and some of the best in my life. And yeah, they've been hard, and I have faced challenges, personal, professional, every way. But sitting where I'm sitting now, I wouldn't change any of it. Because looking back, I'm thrilled with how far I've come, and looking ahead, I'm so excited for what the future holds.
Now, I know for some people listening, that won't be enough, because it'll be a bit vague, but let's just say you had to make some difficult professional decisions in the business and difficult personal decisions. Maybe there was even like some overlap, and that's tough. I would imagine so many people in your situation, like, it's like, what do you do? And I guess what I'm curious is what led that decision making and what reinforced that commitment to the future of the firm.
Making the decisions, it really comes down to, like, every time I've made a major decision in my life, and I'll actually talk about one that's a little bit farther distant, in some ways less personal. In 2018, I made the choice to stop drinking alcohol completely. And I made that decision because I knew that I would never become the person I wanted to be. To be clear to people listening, I was not an alcoholic. It does run in my family, the sort of the recognition there, right? This could be a path. So when I make those decisions, that's exactly what it's about. You look at it and you think, where do I want to be? Who do I want to be? I can do this hard thing.
Yeah. So a lot of it is about, like, evolving into the person you have to be to achieve the things that you want to achieve. I guess, what advice would you give to somebody who's listening that may be dealing with a lot of personal challenges and setbacks, and they're struggling to find that level of purpose and excitement for the future of their firm as well?
A lot of it just comes down to resilience. You do, every day, right? You want that excitement, but that's not what every day is like. That, because you built your own business from the ground up, right? $500 to your name. You've done amazing things with your business. And that's what it's like. A lot of days are just the hard work and the determination to keep going, and resilience in the face of setbacks, because there are setbacks every day. But the resilience to just keep going. Okay, I've got this problem. How do I fix this? Instead of, folding and running away, look at it, figure out the problem, talk to the other people in your life, get input, those kinds of things. I will say, and you didn't ask this question, but I will say that one of the things I think that marks me as a little different than many other business owners is that I am extremely willing to take advice and information from other people, even criticism. And that isn't because I'm unable to make decisions or anything myself, but I value what other people have to say. At the end of the day, it's my business and I will make the decision. But I think I'm very, very good at assimilating a lot of information, bringing it to myself, and ultimately making the choice or decision that's going to be best for the business or the law firm moving forward. And that, I think, requires setting aside your ego a lot. And I think that you just really have to be able to do that. For me, that's I think, a piece that marks me as a little different than many other business owners.
I agree. It's I think taking advice is great as long as it doesn't come from strangers on the internet. That's the only asterisk there.
With that caveat, right?
But I'm curious, like, what were, I guess, some of the unpopular decisions you've made over the years that were initially unpopular, but ultimately were beneficial to the firm long term?
Sometimes it feels like every decision is unpopular, right? Because you make that decision, whatever it might be. Oh, I'll give you one. So in the pandemic, when everybody was going to 4 days a week, I said, okay, team, let's do this. We'll go to 4 days a week. And we did that for a while. Ultimately, it didn't last, right? Because as we were coming out of the pandemic, I'm looking at our numbers and I'm realizing I'm sure everybody likes it, but it isn't producing what I wanted it to produce. So
They preferred 3 days a week?
they would prefer 3 days a week. We went back to 5. I would say that was an unpopular decision, and I knew it would be. And that's where we're still at, is 5 days a week. But it was what we needed to do.
Absolutely. And I think whenever you're making a judgment call like that, I find as leaders that you're considering the organization as a whole and the stability and security of everybody as a whole. And if we're not able to succeed as a firm, then
nobody has a job.
Nobody has a job. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And I think that those parts can be kind of challenging as the business owner, right? It's my duty to do everything I can to grow my business and improve it every bit that I can. And sometimes I have to make decisions that aren't necessarily popular. But at the end of the day, it's what's best for not only me and the business, but also for my team. Absolutely.
Yeah. How would you describe the culture of the firm today?
We have a culture that is consciously non-toxic, consciously striving to do better, consciously striving for excellence every day. My team, and of course, compared to some of the other firms, right, that you've interviewed, we're small, but we're really working toward alignment every day. We have the best interests of our clients, always at the forefront, and I'm really proud of them. We're doing great.
Excellent. What about client experience? I know that's something that's been very, very important to you. I know you guys have started rolling out processes and standard operating procedures like SOPs on every step of the client journey. Like, what have you found most beneficial in terms of ensuring a consistent, high-quality client experience?
Consistent, high-quality client experience is one of those things that, at my level, right, is very much top-down driven. The team needs to see what standards I expect and what standards I live every day and enforce. It just comes down to repetition, making sure that everybody understands what the expectation and what the standards are, and maintaining that and improving it.
I want to go back to people because this one is always, I believe people are always the most challenging aspect of a business when it comes to attracting, interviewing, vetting great people. Like what do you look for in the people that you hire for your firm? And then I guess perhaps any hiring mistakes over the years?
I wish I could say I've never made a hiring mistake. Let me rephrase that.
Lessons.
Right. It's a lesson. That's a really good way to put it, because you can't look at it and say it was a mistake, right? Because I learned from it. Every bit. I've learned from it and moved forward from it. I definitely look for people who have an attitude of wanting to do better, go-getter attitude. Somebody who isn't just waiting to be told what to do. You know what I mean? Somebody who's striving, who wants to do better, wants to improve, wants to grow, wants to provide the best service possible for the clients. I'm lucky. I have a really great team, right now. Everybody's really doing well, and it feels really good. And I feel like the sky's the limit.
Now, Sofia, I know you are a mentor and advocate for more women firm owners in law. Why is that so important to you? And then I guess also, what advice would you give to a female lawyer that wants to break off on their own and start their own firm?
I think it's really important that there are more women law firm owners. Law has been a male-dominated field, for always. Nowadays, that's starting to change, and I do think that we're going to continue to see those changes in the future. But I think that there still is very much a tendency for women to go only so far in their firm, and then due to that firm's culture or whatever, they sort of get sidetracked. And I guess that's where having my own business, I didn't have that ceiling. I didn't run into now I have children, so I can't make partner. I think that for anybody who is willing to put in the work and understanding that your first years are going to be hard, having your own business is just fantastic. Because you're not limited. You can do whatever you want.
Have there ever been times where you thought, you know what, I want to go work at another law firm. I don't want to do this anymore?
Absolutely. I think it'd be crazy to say that didn't happen, right? When I've seen, friends making more money than I make, or, having it easier, they get a paycheck, and for me, if my firm doesn't produce, well, I'll tell you this is something very funny. My kids came home from school the other day and they said, Mom, we told our friends at school that, you own a business. And, they said, that's great because you get paid first. And I said, got news for you. Actually, I get paid last. Everything else, the team, the bills, everything else is first.
That's so funny. Just because I think sometimes people hear business owner,
right,
and they immediately think billionaire,
right?
Or just everything is going amazing. And in my experience, and even some of the conversations we've had, it is such a struggle, such a challenge. I mean, business is tough. You're in a very competitive market. You have a ton of competition constantly. There's always going to be challenges, probably day after day, new challenges. And it takes a unique breed of human being to want to face that every single day.
Yeah, definitely. And the market is only getting more and more challenging. Where I'm in Washington, it's not like down here in Atlanta or anywhere on the East Coast. It's not that competitive, but it's coming. It absolutely is.
Yeah. So as you look ahead to the future of the firm, I mean, what gets you excited? Does anything worry you?
Can we keep going? Can we do it? Will we be able to stand out in the crowd? But what gets me excited is knowing that I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that we can and we will, and I think we will. I think we're positioned very well, I think, in the market.
Absolutely. And you should have, especially after like the growth that you've experienced even over the last 12 months, just a tremendous amount of confidence in being able to continue to grow and scale the firm. And you made it through the pandemic, right? So that's, that's over and done with.
Yeah.
And I find that the more challenges and barriers that we overcome, the more confidence we have in the future, right? In our ability to solve problems, right? It's not to say that there won't be future problems. It's just that you can better navigate them,
right?
Whatever they are.
You're 100% right, Michael. I have found that to be 100% true in my own life. Every time, I encounter a challenge, whether it's that I need to let an employee go, whether it's, personal or whatever, but facing those challenges every time. And then the next time, you have the confidence to do it. And when I look at the growth that I've achieved personally and professionally, it's really remarkable. And one thing I would say that really rings true, and I want to say it was Eric Chafin, I'm not sure who said this at the summit, talking about how you really can't have the professional growth without the personal growth. And that is so true. And I have found that to be absolutely true in my own life, because these past couple years, I absolutely have grown professionally, but I think that I've grown personally at least as much, if not even more, than professionally.
Speaking of advice, I know you mentioned earlier some of the good advice you've received, but I'm curious, what's been the best advice you've received in terms of growing your firm, and what's been the worst?
I think the best advice, and this is so boring, right? But just keep going. Not even just with growing your firm, but with anything, give up before you reach the goal. And if you can see it through those hard times, right? And just keep going. I think that's the best advice. The worst advice is don't market. That was the worst advice.
Don't market, or take it easy, or relax.
Right.
Everything will be fine.
Yeah.
Right. All these problems that bother you, just ignore them. They'll solve themselves.
Yeah. That's not good advice.
As we come to a close, this being the Game Changing Attorney podcast, what does being a game changer mean to you?
So I give it a little thought, right? Because I knew you'd ask it. What it means to me really is facing your fears. It means, get up, look in the mirror, face your weakness, face your fear. Don't shy away from it. Don't pretend it isn't there. Face it and work on it every day. Continuous improvement.
I'm going to give a huge thank you to Sofia for taking the time to join us on the Game Changing Attorney podcast, and I want to congratulate you once again for winning the coveted Elite Firm of the Year award at the 2024 CRISP Game Changers Summit. If you found this episode valuable, here are 3 free ways that I can help you grow your law firm. Number 1, download the first chapter of my book absolutely free at GameChangingAttorney.com. Number 2, you can shoot me a text at 404-531-7691, and I'll answer any question that you've got for me. And finally, number 3, if you can leave this podcast a 5-star review, it'll help us gain access to more influential thought leaders and bring their lessons learned here to you. For more information on our interview with Sofia Miguel, see the show notes for this episode in your podcast app or visit legalpodcast.com.